we are honoring pioneer families of Muleshoe that still have family members who live here in Muleshoe, because this is the 100th anniversary of Muleshoe. And Melba Bratcher is certainly one of those. Now, Melba, your grandparents on both sides actually were pioneers.
Yes, they were. My dad was born here, and I suppose my mother was. She was not. She came here with her parents.
I see.
Mr. and Miss Shofner.
And what was your maternal grandparents, the Shofners' names?
Marcus and Alva.
And so your Berman father, what was his first name?
Dale.
Dale Berman. And his parents were who?
Ed Berman, and I never met my grandfather because he died when my dad was 17 years old. And Sina Berman was my grandmother.
And we have been talking about them just recently, and now we want to talk about the Shofners. So tell me about your grandparents' Shofners. Now, Alva Shofner, what was her maiden name?
Her maiden name was Bruton.
And where was she born?
Where was Alva born?
Where was Alva born?
Okay, let me look. I have to look here. Alva, she was born in Bang, I think.
In Bangs, uh-huh.
Oh, in May. In Maytown. That's
Maytown.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Maytown.
And when was her birthday?
And she was the oldest daughter of 10 children.
Oh, my.
And she was born October the 24th, 1891.
1891, Alva Burton, right? And so now, what about your grandfather, H.M. Shofner? Where was he born, and when was his birthday?
He was born in Ellis County, Texas, and he was one of 14 children, or 15 children, and he was born April the 1st. I always remember his birthday because it was April the 1st, 1887.
So he was April Fool baby.
Yeah.
Now, when did they marry, and where did they marry?
Let's see. They married October the 18th, 1908, in Bangs, Texas.
In Bangs. And this was her wedding dress.
Yes.
We have it on a mannequin there. And do you think it looks a reddish color? Do you think it was?
It was silk, but silky color.
Uh-huh.
Material. And it could have been a brown, but I'm not sure,
Uh-huh. Did you ever see it?
The only time I saw it was at their 50th wedding anniversary, and they had it on a mannequin.
Uh-huh.
There.
And that is the picture we have today. Isn't that interesting? I do believe it is a brown dress.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was.
And that was Alva Burton Shofner's wedding gown in Bruton, not Burton. Bruton. Okay, thank you for changing that for me. Bruton. Now, when did they come to Muleshoe or Bailey County?
Let's see. They were married in 1908, and they had 5 children. Herman, born in 1909, Zora May in 1912, JT in 1914, Olita, my mother, in 1919, and Ruth in 1922. And Herman died in 1911. They came to Bailey County. Marcus, my grandfather, came and bought land in the YL community in 1922. Must have been when Ruth was a baby.
Uh-huh.
And he returned and built their house in the late fall of 1924. So in 1925, they started on their trip to Bailey County with their 4 children, leaving Bangs Bangs, Texas. And they were driving in a Model T touring car. The weather was so cold that Marcus's mother heated and wrapped bricks and rocks, and they did that a lot so that the kids could stay warm.
There were no heaters, of course, in cars or air conditioners either one. There were barely cars.
And then they got to La Mesa the first day, where my grandfather Marcus's brother lived, Presley Shofner. And then they continued their journey the next day to YL. And the only road across the sandhills was by Fairview, then north into Muleshoe. And the sand was dry and loose, and bear grass had to be put in the ruts to keep them from sinking into the sand.
So there was no highway or road or trail between Soudan and Muleshoe at that time.
Right. I don't know where Fairview is, but...
Well, Fairview is south and a little bit east of Muleshoe. You'd go out 214 and pass the old Kittrell place and turn to your east, and it would be back over where there is today King Spring or King Airport.
Oh, yeah. It was probably sandy. It still is kind of sandy down in there. Yeah. When they arrived at Muleshoe on January the 5th of 1925, a boxcar loaded with their furniture and belongings was waiting to be unloaded. I guess at that time we had a railroad.
Yes, It had come by then, I'm sure.
Okay, and so...
because the reason I would know that it's the 100th anniversary of Muleshoe, so Muleshoe started in 1913, and the reason Muleshoe was created because they moved over to the railroad tracks.
Right.
And so your grandparents came in 25?
Yes, in 25, yeah. And so my grandfather, Marcus, he got a man from the Big Square, I guess that was a ranch, I don't know, and who had an old Model T Ford truck to haul the furniture and to their new home.
Big Square was another community, and I believe it was more toward Lasbody and a little bit maybe toward Dimmitt, if I remember correctly. I may be wrong on that.
Okay. And the next day, they, while going to Muleshoe in a bad windstorm, we know what that was like, and a sandstorm, Marcus said, well, to his son, JT, well, what do you think, son? And he said, Dad, I think you pulled a boner.
And what the funny thing is, JT lived here all the rest of his life and died here in Muleshoe. And he reared his family, and his daughter was Alva Lee, now Peeler of Hereford. And his wife was Ida Mae, and she was a Kemp. And they always lived here in the area.
In fact, the Kemps lived out there close to where my grandparents first moved.
Oh, really?
Bill Mellon, on the Bill Mellon, part of the Bill Mellon place.
And Argelee was a Kemp. Miss Bill Mellon. Yes,
Right, yeah. And Marcus has he always farmed. He farmed that place in YL for a while, and he even dug a pit pump. The Bermans really had the first pit pump on their place, and
it would have been nearby, wouldn't it?
Yes, it was really
out at YL also.
Right. And he loved to go fishing and hunting And grandmother did too. In fact, I think she was a better fisherman. And they were always going off, and we'd have fish fries when they come back. And it was always good. One of his favorite stories is when he went duck hunting and killed 16 ducks with one shot. Alva would pick the duck feathers and make feather pillows out of them. And she was pretty talented in cooking and, seamstress. And she was always working in her garden. She always had a real pretty flowers and vegetables. And we would go over there every Sunday and eat with the Shofners and go to church and to the Methodist church.
Now, was that the Methodist church at YL or in town?
Well, I'm sure I wasn't there when they were probably going to YL church.
Oh, okay.
But at first, that was a school.
Yes.
The YL was a school, and then after they kind of consolidated with Muleshoe, well, the Methodist church at YL bought it and made it into a church, and they added the 2-story.
Oh, really?
And made it a more
churchy.
Yeah, and the steeple and everything, and
your grandmother, Alva Shofner, Miss H.M. Shofner, was my first Sunday school teacher after we came to Muleshoe. Was she ever your Sunday school teacher?
Oh, I'm sure she was. Yeah, she probably was. Yeah. She was a good Christian lady. And like Marcus had a dairy out at his where they lived. And
now, was that after they moved to the other side of town?
Yes.
Okay, so that would have been off of the Lubbock Highway, and not the Lubbock, the Clovis Highway. Pardon me, west of town, and right along the railroad track where they lived. Right.
Right.
Uh-huh.
It was an adobe top flat house, and then the dairy was there at the place.
Okay, and that would be the first house just next to where Ruth Briscoe lives, right?
Right.
And so, did you ever live in that house, Melba?
Yes, my husband Tom Bratcher and we moved there after my grandfather had passed away, and grandmother was living in town in an apartment, and so we were living on the Lubbock Highway, just out a little ways. Tom had been farming a little place, and then he got a job working at what used to be Pioneer Natural Gas. And he worked there for a while, and then he worked for Lee Dunbar that had that pig farm out that way, and he helped him build that. And then grandmother rented us the house that they had, raised their family in. And we had to go in there, and Tom's father, he was a carpenter, and they went under grandmother always had a root cellar or a cellar underneath the house. You went in the kitchen, and there it was down. She always had a curtain hanging up there, and before I had my oldest son, he was nearly 5, not quite 5, when we moved in there, and I wasn't going to have him running down those steps, so I had Tom and his father, they put a door up, and then he went down underneath there. Grandmother always kept her canned goods down there.
Yes.
And she tried to keep us grandkids out of there, but we were always climbing around, and knowing that we wasn't supposed to, but we did anyway. And so they had to shore up, put more braces underneath, because I guess all the years of the railroad tracks vibration from, and it needed it badly. So they put new braces under there, and then we had to. The inside didn't have sheetrock. It was plastered.
Yes.
And so we replastered the walls and painted them and got them to looking. And then my husband, Tom, was, A.J. Phillips. Do you remember them? Well, they worked together at the Pioneer Natural Gas. And they went into partnership with some pigs. And they built some barns, and we had, pigs there.
I think every Pioneer family had a cellar. And it wasn't just for protection, as we might have today, a basement. But that's where the lady of the house canned her things in the kitchen and then carried them to the cellar. And they kept longer, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. We, they would get together. My aunts, would get together and they'd can, even on the Berman side.
Even especially this time of the year in August.
Right. I can remember shelling peas, doing things like that,
Now, what year did you all move out to your grandmother's home, Alva Shofner, at the edge of Muleshoe off the Lubbock Highway?
I think it was in 1968.
1968. And that house is still standing today.
Yes.
But it doesn't have the flat roof.
No, I think whoever bought it, they put a tin roof, a peaked tin roof.
Because those flat roofs, they catch that water, and it's real hard to repair them. And it still stands right across from that rambling railroad track that shakes everything as it goes by. But I'm sure you got used to it, right?
Yes, if you live around Muleshoe, you're used to a train going through it.
And that's good, because that's why Muleshoe actually was established, and that brought people here from all over and brought their goods like it did your grandparents. What are some of the happy things that you remember about your grandparents?
Well, let's see. I can remember.
Wait, I need to talk about that house. How much did you all rent that house for?
$35 a month.
$35 a month in 1965, right?
Right.
Oh, that's a jewel. Okay, go ahead and share some more about your grandparents, Mr. and Ms. H.M. Shofner.
Christmas was always fun for us kids, because grandmother they'd always have a big tree, and it was usually a real tree,
Sure.
And there would be packages under it, and you'd go one day and come back and there'd be more, but they didn't have any names on them, so you would wonder whose packages they were. And of course, as kids, as grandkids, we'd try to figure it out, and then on Christmas Eve we always opened up packages, and she would always have the names on them. And, we'd all wonder how she did it.
I wonder, too. That was a chore, wasn't it?
Yeah. And then Grandpa usually was always the Santa Claus. And one day, I think Keith and I was staying over there. I don't remember.
And that's your brother, Keith Berman, who still lives here in Muleshoe.
He still lives here. And we were staying in that back bedroom. It was a 3-bedroom house, and it had one bath in between the two back bedrooms. And we were looking. I don't know why I was looking in the closet, but anyway, we were, and there was that Santa Claus suit.
Oh no!
And of course, I think I was old enough to know.
Well, that's good. This is a picture of H.M. Marcus and Alva Shofner, Alva Shofner, and on their 50th wedding anniversary here in Muleshoe. Now, where was this picture made?
It was made in a house out on the Plainview Highway that was Bill Jim's, St. Clair's, up on the hill. And Mac Ragsdale worked for him, and he was married to Juanine Zormay and Jinx Beller's daughter.
Juanine Beller Ragsdale was his wife, and they lived here in Muleshoe. And now this picture was made at the same time in that same home, and these are the children with Mr. and Miss Shofner. Can you identify them for us?
Yes, this is Zormay.
And that became Jinx Beller's wife, Zormay Beller, and she lived here.
Right. And then J.T. Shofner's right next to her. And then my mother, Oleta Berman. And then Ruth Wimberly. Ruth Wimberly.
Now, she is the only one of their children that really moved off from Muleshoe, isn't she?
Yes, they moved to Colorado, yeah, close to Denver. And they had 4 children. Yeah, 4 children, and one was killed in a tragic accident.
And JT had 1. Now, how many did Zormay and Jinx have? 2?
2 girls.
2 girls. And is Juanine still alive?
Yes.
And where does she live?
I think she lives in Oklahoma, close to Rhonda, her daughter.
Okay. And now, is her sister still living?
Yes, and she lives in close to Houston, Conroe, I think.
And what is her name?
Lavelle.
Lavelle. And then your mother had 2 children, right?
Yes.
So there was 2, 4, 5, and 9 grandchildren, right?
Right.
And most of them were reared right here and could enjoy the Shofners, right?
Yes, Ruth and her husband, Herschel Wimberly, they lived in Progress for a while.
Did they?
And they run that store that was there.
I see. No, I don't remember a store in Progress ever.
Right. And
before my time.
Josh Blocker, was right next door, lived right next door to him. And I was scared of him when I was growing up because he was kind of like a hermit. And he was killed, for his money. And they didn't find it. But my uncle and somebody else uncovered it. It was buried under his house in the floor.
And who was your uncle that found the Josh Blocker money?
Herschel Wimberly.
Oh, the neighbor then.
Yes.
I see. Any other memories that you have?
Oh, let's see. Grandpa, my Marcus, I call him Pawpaw. He always was very generous. He always gave us quarters every Saturday, so that we could go spend. And he was always a jokester, and he had one of those Chinese finger things.
Yes, you stuck it.
Yes, and he delighted in getting us grandkids to do that.
You would buy those at the curio shops, especially in New Mexico.
And he'd let me drive when I could drive his car. One time we went to Las Vegas, New Mexico, because one Lavelle, that's Ruth's daughter, oldest daughter, she was getting married, and so they did live there in Las Vegas, New Mexico. So we went up there, and on the way I had just gotten my license, and Mother, I think, talked him into it. And
so you must have been about 14.
Yeah, 14.
Because you could get your driver's license at 14 in those years.
Right. And we was driving on that good highway, going up there. Some mother talked him into letting me, and he always had new cars and Fords. A lot of time he would buy a Ford, and so he let me drive. Not in the town, but on the road. And let's see.
We might show you this 1966 picture of him in the Muleshoe Journal. And I thought it was interesting. They had just started Old Timers Group, they called it.
Oh, yeah.
And it is what would be the Bida County Senior Citizens today. And they met in the First United Methodist Church, but it was just called the Methodist Church then. And I remember J. Frank Perry was the instigator of that. But this is celebrating his birthday. Which birthday was that? Can you read there and see?
Let's see. I'm trying to see here.
It's down in the story.
Right. Let's see here. Oh, there it is. Well,
Let's see if I can help you.
Right in here it says, tells when he was born.
79th birthday.
79th.
And so I thought it really interesting what it said about this group, that they had new members. Bertie Paul was one of them. Who was Bertie Paul?
I don't know.
I thought she was a school teacher,
Yes.
maybe.
Oh, yes.
And no, or was it Greta Paul that was the school teacher? C.F. Gart, G-A-R-T, Leota Thomason,
Thompson, I know
and
she was a teacher.
she was, and Mrs. Wade Clements and Morris Griffith, and Mrs. McFerrin Stowe, which would have been Twyla Farrell Stowe of Topeka, Kansas, was a guest. Now that was Mr. and Miss C.R. Farrell's daughter, whose husband was a Methodist bishop, and Twyla was Honest Bobo's sister too. I thought that was really interesting from that paper and picture. Now this is another picture, and this is a picture of who?
Of my mother, Olita.
Olita Shofner Berman and Mrs. Dale Berman. And wasn't she pretty?
Yeah, she was.
Now, do you know when she was born?
She was born October the 19th, 1919.
So before they came here shortly, she was born. And where was she born?
I don't know.
Oh, that's okay. That's fine. Now, another picture shows your whole family, right?
Right.
This is Mr. and Miss Dale Berman. And also, the little boy is Keith Berman, who still lives here in Muleshoe today. And then the little girl is Melba Berman, who became Melba Bratcher, Miss Tom Bratcher, and she still lives here today. So have you lived here all your life, Melba?
Yes, I was born here, and we moved off for a while, but then we came back.
And did you raise your family here?
Let's see. Darren, he was born in Clovis. That's my oldest. And then my youngest, who was born nearly 5 years and 3 months later, and he was born in Muleshoe. That's Dakota. That is Dalen.
And they both went to school here.
Well, we moved when Dalen, he was just a baby, and Darren was just in kindergarten. We moved to Bovina, and we moved around from Bovina to Ponca City, Oklahoma, to Texarkana, Texas, and then to Angleton, Texas, and then we came back when the Toke plant was being built.
Oh, uh-huh.
And my husband, Tom, was in construction at that time.
I see.
And he got here just as they were putting the foundation down and started helping. He was a surveyor.
And do you remember what year that was that you all came back to Muleshoe?
In 1979.
In 79. Now, this picture is of whom?
This is my mother, my brother, Keith, my mother, Olita, and me, Melba.
Would you guess what year this was taken?
I would have think I looked like I was about 6, maybe 5, something like that.
What year would that be?
Well, I was born in 1943, so.
In Muleshoe.
Yes.
So, do you have anything else you would like to share? Memories, especially of your grandparents, Mr. and Ms. H.M. Shofner, real pioneers of Muleshoe?
Well, my grandmother was pretty resilient, I guess is the word you want to say. When we moved to Bovina, I'd still check on her because she was still living up in that apartment. And so one day she was in the hospital, and she was always catching rainwater and putting it on her flowers.
Yes.
And washing her hair in it. She had she never cut her hair, and she would always braid her hair, and it was real white. And so she was working in her back. She had a little backyard.
Now, if you can see from this picture, she always wore it up, didn't she? Or that's what I remember.
Right. She braided it and then put it up in a bun. And she'd let me do it once in a while. And so I found out she was in the hospital, and what she had done was she was in her backyard, and a snake had bit her on the thumb. And so it was her left thumb. And her hand swelled up and got black and blue.
And by this time, she was old.
Right, yeah. But she was still gonna have a garden if she could have it. She had the most beautiful flowers, those cannas.
Yes.
She grew them a lot, and when they lived out just on the other side of Muleshoe, she was always growing those, and so. I don't know if that stopped her. She probably not. she probably still kept on when she could. And then my grandfather had to go into the nursing home, and she went with him because he couldn't live at home. And he didn't die in the nursing home, but he died in the hospital.
And he went into what was then the Muleshoe Nursing Home, and it was on the south end of the hospital on South First Street, where the hospital is still located today.
Right. And then when he passed away, well, she went back home for a little bit, and then she got in that apartment. And she would, stayed there for a good while, and then she had to go into the nursing home. And she was a pioneer. Yeah, right. She was. Both of them were. And I forgot, my grandfather had these rent houses. Do you remember those little rent houses out on the Clovis Highway, right where the John Deere is?
Oh, sort of at Shady Rest.
Well, yes.
Right before you get to Shady Rest in Wilson Drilling.
Right. And Wilson, the Wilsons had a store on the corner.
A grocery store right there.
Right there on the corner. And
well, I think really that was the Aylesworth Acres. That's what that was called back then, yes.
But my grandparents had houses, about like 5 houses along there. They weren't very big, but he rented that out, and he had other rent houses. So he did that and had farms. He farmed out west of town, and then he had that acreage right there where the bean and pea. That was
all his land that went right up to their home then. And over there by where JT and Ida Mae Shofner, his son and daughter-in-law, lived. And
to the bus barn.
Up to the bus barn. It was all his land.
Right. And where the John Deere is.
Even where John Deere is today.
Right. That's where he had his rent houses. That was right by the highway. And I can remember my daddy and mother helping him when one renter would move out. They'd go in and help him, paint and do other things like that. Right. And he had a gray horse that my brother Keith and I would ride, and they were lots of fun for us grandkids. And they had a big tree at the back door, close to their back porch. And my brother and his other cousins, of course I was probably too small, they built a tree house in it. And I think it was still there when my husband and I lived there. And it may be rotted out by now, but
what wonderful memories. And I thank you so much for sharing about real survivors, pioneers of our community, Mr. and Mrs. H.M. Shofner. And we have been visiting with Melba Bratcher, the farmer Melba Berman, whose both sets of grandparents, maternal and paternal, were pioneers of this community. Anything else, Melba?
No, I can't think of anything else.
Thank you so very, very much. And this has been brought to you by the Muleshoe Chamber of Commerce and Agriculture and Randall Field CPA firm, honoring the pioneers of this community on our 100th anniversary of Muleshoe.